The morning sun rose over the massive stone buildings of the War Academy on planet Velthara. The academy was so big that it took 3 hours to walk from one end to the other. Inside these buildings, millions of Keth soldiers spent their entire lives learning how to win wars. Rael Vorthak walked slowly through the main hall. He was the supreme tactician, which meant he was the smartest war leader in the entire Keth Empire. His purple skin had many scars from old battles, and his forearms moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. The hall was filled with young Keth students studying at floating desks. Each desk showed a different battle from history. Some showed space battles with thousands of ships. Others showed ground wars on distant planets. Every single battle had been won by the Keth Empire. "Students," Rael said in his deep voice, "today we will review the Andralan campaign." The room went quiet. Everyone knew this story. 300 years ago, the Andralan people thought they were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They had won wars against dozens of other species. But when they fought the Keth, they lost in just 6 days. "Tell me," Rael continued, "why did the Andralans fail?" A young student raised her hand. "They used the same tactics for too long. We studied their battles and learned all their moves." "Correct. And what did we do?" Another student answered, "We used the Nexus grid to predict every action they would take. Then we prepared perfect counters for each one." Rael nodded. The Nexus grid was the greatest computer system ever built. It sat deep under the academy, in a room the size of a city. The grid knew every battle tactic that had ever been used by any species in the galaxy. When the Keth wanted to fight someone new, they fed all the information about their enemies into the grid. The grid would then tell them exactly how to win. The system was so good that Keth generals didn't even need to think anymore. They just followed the grid's instructions and victory was certain. This was how the Keth had conquered 47 different species without ever losing a single war. "The grid has made us unbeatable," Rael told his students. "We do not guess. We do not hope. We calculate victory." After class, Rael walked to his office in the highest tower of the academy. The walls were covered with maps of the galaxy. Red marks showed every planet the Keth controlled. There were thousands of them. Only a few small areas remained unconquered. His assistant, Dek Thyril, was waiting for him with a datapad. Dek was young and eager to please. His green eyes showed respect whenever he looked at Rael. "Supreme Tactician," Dek said. "The scout ships have returned from the Outer Rim. They found something interesting." Rael sat down at his desk. "Show me." Dek activated a hologram that showed a small blue planet. "The scouts discovered this world 3 days ago. It's called Earth. The dominant species calls themselves humans." Rael studied the planet. It looked peaceful enough. White clouds swirled over blue oceans. Green and brown land masses were scattered across the surface. "How many humans are there?" "About 8 billion, sir." "Military strength?" "Basic technology." "They use chemical rockets for space travel. Their weapons are mostly projectile-based. They have nuclear bombs, but not many of them." Rael almost smiled. This would be easy. "Have you fed their information to the Nexus grid?" "Yes, sir." The grid analyzed over 10,000 human conflicts from their history. The results are very clear. Dek touched the datapad and numbers appeared in the air. Battle formations, weapon types, supply methods, leadership structures. Everything the humans had ever done in war was laid out in neat columns. "The humans fight in predictable patterns," Dek continued. "They gather their armies in large groups. They attack from obvious directions. Their leaders make emotional decisions instead of logical ones. The grid calculates a victory probability of 99.9%. "Excellent. How long for complete conquest?" 6 weeks, sir. Maybe less." Rael leaned back in his chair. This was almost disappointing. After conquering species like the war-loving Korthans and the tactical genius Zentari, fighting humans seemed like child's play. "Sir," Dek said carefully, "the grid recommends we use this as a training exercise for our junior officers. The human resistance will be too weak to provide real combat experience, but it will be good practice." "Agreed. Assign Commander Zeth Morvain to lead the invasion. Give him 300 ships, that should be more than enough. Yes, sir. Should we offer the humans a chance to surrender first? Of course. We always follow proper protocol. Send the standard message. 72 hours to surrender completely. If they refuse, we begin the invasion. Deck bowed and left the office. Rail turned back to his maps. Soon there would be one more red mark on the galaxy. The humans would become part of the Great Keth Empire, just like everyone else. He walked to the window and looked out at the academy grounds. Thousands of students were practicing combat formations. Their movements were perfect, exactly as the grid had taught them. Every step was calculated. Every strategy was tested and proven. The Keth had spent 3,000 years perfecting war. They had studied every possible way to fight. They had learned from every victory and every defeat. They had created a system that made losing impossible. Another species falls to Keth superiority, Rail said to himself. Down in the basement of the academy, the Nexus grid hummed quietly. Millions of data streams flowed through its processors. It reviewed human battle tactics from their ancient wars to their modern conflicts. Everything fit the expected patterns. Humans attacked in straight lines, they retreated when outnumbered. They followed their leaders without question. They used the same strategies over and over again. The grid found no surprises, no unusual tactics, no creative solutions. The analysis was complete. Humans were just another primitive species that would fall easily to Keth military science. The grid did not know about Tuesday night games. It did not understand recreation or creativity. It had never heard of something called Dungeons and Dragons. And it certainly did not know about a human named Jae Hyun, who was about to change everything the Keth thought they knew about warfare. But that was about to change very soon. 3 weeks later, 300 Keth warships appeared in space around Earth. Each ship was 10 times bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their black metal hulls reflected the light from Earth's sun like dark mirrors. Inside the ships, thousands of Keth soldiers prepared for another easy victory. Commander Zeth Morvain stood on the bridge of his flagship. He was younger than Supreme Tactician Rail, but just as confident. His silver uniform showed he had won 12 previous invasions without losing a single battle. Earth would be number 13. Communications officer, Zeth said. Send the standard. Surrender message to all human governments. Yes, Commander. The message went out to every capital city on Earth. Presidents, prime ministers, and kings all received the same words at the same time. The translation systems made sure every human could understand it perfectly. People of Earth, the message, began in hundreds of different human languages. You have been selected for integration into the Keth Empire. Your planet shows potential for productive membership in our civilization. Surrender your military forces within 72 hours. If you comply, your transition to productive citizenship will be efficient and painless. Resistance will result in necessary force to complete integration. This is your only warning. On Earth, chaos began immediately. Emergency meetings started, in every government building. Military leaders gathered around tables covered with maps and reports. Scientists tried to figure out how the alien ships worked. News reporters told frightened people that first contact with aliens was really happening, but the response was exactly what the Nexus grid had predicted. Sir, reported Lieutenant Tak Corvain from the communications station, we are receiving responses from human governments. They are requesting negotiations, asking for more time and attempting to gather information about our intentions. As expected, Zeth replied. The grid calculated a 94.7% probability of this exact response pattern. What about their military movements? Human armed forces are mobilizing globally. They are concentrating their ships and aircraft at strategic locations. Their ground forces are moving to defensive positions around major cities and industrial centers. Zeth nodded. Everything was going according to plan. The humans were doing exactly what 46 other species had done before them. First came the panic and confusion. Then came the desperate attempts at diplomacy. Finally would come the futile military resistance. Any unusual responses? Zeth asked. Lieutenant Tak checked his screens. Nothing significant, sir. We detected one transmission that does not fit standard patterns. but it appears to be from a single individual with no governmental authority. Show me. The message appeared on the main screen. It was very short and came from a place called Portland, Oregon, in a country called the United States. The sender was identified as Jae Hyun, age 28, occupation listed as Information Technology Specialist. The entire message was only 5 words. Challenge accepted. Roll for initiative. What does this mean? Zeth asked. Unknown, sir. Our translation systems converted the words correctly, but the meaning is unclear. Roll for initiative does not appear in any human military manual or diplomatic protocol. Zeth studied the message for a moment, then dismissed it. Ignore it. Probably just a confused individual. Focus on the government responses. The next 72 hours passed exactly as the Nexus grid had predicted. Human government sent dozens of messages asking for negotiations. They offered trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and peaceful coexistence. Some countries tried to surrender separately from others. A few attempted to form military alliances. All of these responses were in the grid's database. Other species had tried the same tactics. None of them had worked. When the deadline ended, Zeth broadcast a second message to Earth. Your time has expired. Integration will now begin through necessary force. Surrender your military assets immediately to minimize casualties. Begin the invasion, Zeth ordered his fleet. The Keth ships moved into position over major cities around the world. Landing craft launched from the main ships carrying soldiers and equipment toward the surface. Everything proceeded with perfect military precision. The first landings happened in 12 different locations at exactly the same time. London, Tokyo, New York, Moscow, Beijing, Delhi, Sydney, Cairo, Mexico City, São Paulo, Lagos, and Berlin. Each landing force was large enough to capture an entire city within hours. Human military forces responded immediately. Fighter jets attacked the landing craft. Ground forces set up defensive positions. Naval ships fired missiles at the alien vessels. The humans fought bravely, but their weapons barely scratched the Keith armor. Resistance is minimal, reported Major Vex Corthane from London. Human weapons are ineffective against our shields. We should control the city center within 6 hours. Same report from all landing sites, confirmed Lieutenant Tak. Human tactics are exactly as predicted. Conventional forces arranged in standard defensive formations. No surprises. Zeth felt satisfied. Another perfect victory for the Keth Empire. He was already planning his report to Supreme Tactician Rail when something unexpected happened. Sir, Lieutenant Tak said, his voice uncertain. We are receiving unusual transmissions from the human forces. What kind of transmissions? They appear to be using non-standard communication protocols. Instead of military frequencies, they are using civilian networks, gaming platforms, social media, and entertainment channels. Gaming platforms? Yes, sir. They seem to be coordinating military actions through recreational communication systems. We are detecting references to dice, character sheets, and something called campaign coordination. Zeth frowned. This was not in the invasion manual. Are they using these systems to hide their real communications? We do not believe so, sir. The transmissions are not encrypted. They appear to be genuine discussions about games and recreational activities, but they are somehow connected to troop movements and tactical decisions. Explain. Lieutenant Tak looked confused. Sir, one transmission from Tokyo mentions rolling for stealth checks before flanking maneuver. Another from London references using environmental advantages for surprise attacks, +2 bonus. The language does not match any known military terminology. What do our intelligence experts say? They are confused, sir. These terms do not appear in any human military database. They seem to come from recreational activities, but they are being used to coordinate actual combat operations. Zeth stared at the communications display. Lists of strange messages scrolled past. Natural 20 on initiative roll. Advantage on the attack because of flanking. DM says we can use the terrain bonus. Remember the house rules about creative solutions. None of it made sense. Sir, Major Vex reported from London. Human forces are beginning to behave in unexpected ways. They are not following conventional defensive patterns. Some units appear to be playing games while fighting. Playing games? Yes, sir. We observed one human unit stop their retreat to have what appeared to be an argument about mathematics and probability. Another group was seen rolling small dice before making tactical decisions. They appear to be treating combat as some form of recreational activity. Zeth had conquered 12 worlds, but he had never seen anything like this. The Nexus grid had prepared him for desperate charges, clever ambushes, and sophisticated strategies. It had not prepared him for an enemy that seemed to be having fun during a war. Continue monitoring, Zeth ordered, and send a full report to Supreme Tactician Rail. Something unusual is happening here. On Earth, in a small house in Portland, Oregon, Jae-hyun sat at his kitchen table. His laptop was open, showing multiple chat windows with people all around the world. Dice were scattered across the table next to notebooks filled with maps and diagrams. Okay, everyone, he typed into the chat. Phase 1 is complete. Time to show these aliens what happens when you challenge a planet full of gamers to the ultimate campaign. He picked up a 20-sided die and rolled it across the table. It came up 20. Perfect, Jay said with a smile. Natural 20 to start the real game. Let's teach these Keth what creative problem-solving really means. 4 days into the invasion, everything started going wrong for the Keth forces. What should have been a simple conquest was turning into the strangest military campaign in their 3,000-year history. The first major problem happened in Seoul, South Korea. Commander Dek Thiral had surrounded the city with his best troops. The Nexus grid said this maneuver always worked. Trapped enemies either surrendered quickly or tried a desperate breakout attack that failed. Both outcomes led to easy victory, but the humans in Seoul did neither. Instead, they did something that made no sense at all. The human soldiers divided into small groups and started what could only be described as performances throughout the city. Some groups dressed in bright costumes and shouted strange battle cries. Others did coordinated dances while carrying weapons. Several groups appeared to be having loud arguments about numbers and chances. What are they doing? Dek asked his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Yoon Setek. We are not certain, sir. They appear to be engaging in recreational activities while under siege. Dek watched the battlefield displays with growing confusion. One group of humans had spent 4 hours debating whether a large bus provided enough cover for what they called a surprise attack. They kept consulting small dice and pieces of paper before making any decisions. Are they stalling for time? Dek wondered. We do not believe so, sir. They seem genuinely engaged in these activities. Look at this group here. Lieutenant Yoon pointed to a squad of human soldiers who had set up what looked like a picnic table in the middle of a war zone. They were sitting around it, rolling dice and arguing about something called action points, while Keth forces advanced toward them. This is impossible, Dek muttered. No species acts like this during combat, but somehow, despite their bizarre behavior, the humans were winning. Every time Keth forces tried to advance, they found themselves outmaneuvered by tactics that made no logical sense. The humans seemed to treat warfare like some kind of elaborate game where creativity mattered more than following proper military procedures. The breaking point came when a small group of humans defeated an entire Keth squadron through what could only be called performance art. They convinced the Keth soldiers to chase one human through the city streets. The chase led through what turned out to be an elaborate trap involving civilian buildings, improvised explosives, and a subway system that the humans had somehow turned into a maze. When the smoke cleared, the entire Keth squadron was captured, and the humans were celebrating by rolling dice and high-fiving each other. Commander, Lieutenant Yoon reported, we have lost Seoul. The humans have somehow taken control of the entire city using tactics that do not exist in any military database. Dek stared at the reports in disbelief. How is this possible? We believe they are receiving coordination from an external source. All human forces are using similar unconventional methods. They appear to be following guidance from someone who understands warfare differently than any military academy teaches. Similar reports came in from around the world. In Tokyo, human forces had turned the entire battle into what they called a scavenger hunt, leading Keth troops on elaborate chases that ended with the aliens confused and surrounded. In London, humans convinced Keth soldiers to participate in what they called diplomatic tea parties, then somehow talked them into switching sides. Commander Zeth Morvain received these reports with growing alarm. He immediately contacted Supreme Tactician Rael on Velthara. "Sir," Zeth reported over the long-distance communication system, "we have encountered an unprecedented situation. Human military behavior does not match any known tactical doctrine." Rael appeared as a hologram on the bridge. His forearms were crossed, showing his displeasure. "Explain." "The humans are treating warfare like a recreational activity. They make decisions by rolling dice. They argue about mathematics and probability instead of following orders. They appear to be having fun while fighting a war. That is impossible. No species behaves irrationally during combat." "With respect, sir, I am watching it happen. Our predictive systems cannot process their actions because their actions make no logical sense." Rael was quiet for a long moment. As Supreme Tactician, he had studied every form of warfare ever recorded. He had seen desperate last stands, clever ambushes, and brilliant strategies. But he had never heard of anything like this. "Have you identified their command structure?" Rael asked. "We traced many of their communications to a single individual on their planet, a human named Jae Hyun. He appears to be coordinating resistance efforts globally." "Show me." The display changed to show a modest house in Portland, Oregon. Inside, a young human male sat at a table covered with books, papers, and small, colorful dice. He was talking to other humans through a computer screen, explaining what sounded like battle plans using language that made no sense. "Our intel suggests this individual holds a position called Dungeon Master," Zeth continued. "This appears to be a leadership role in a recreational activity called Dungeons and Dragons." Rael studied the image. The human looked completely ordinary. He was not wearing a military uniform. He had no visible weapons. He appeared to be playing a game with his friends while somehow directing a global war effort. "You are telling me that a single human playing games is outmaneuvering the entire Keth military?" "It appears so, sir. This Dungeons and Dragons activity seems to train humans in creative problem-solving and unconventional thinking. They approach warfare not as a science to be calculated, but as an improvisation exercise where imagination matters more than logistics." Rael watched as Jay rolled a 20-sided die and smiled. The human then sent new instructions to resistance groups in multiple cities. Within minutes, Keth forces in those locations reported new types of unexpected human behavior. "Sir," Zeth added, "the humans have started using what they call house rules. They claim that traditional military engagement protocols do not apply, because they never agreed to follow our procedures. That is not how warfare works. The humans disagree, sir. They have decided to fight according to their own rules instead of ours." Rael had spent his entire life studying military science. He understood force projection, supply lines, troop morale, and strategic planning. He had created systems that could predict enemy behavior with near-perfect accuracy. But he had never considered that an enemy might simply refuse to behave predictably. "Sir," Zeth said, "what are your orders? The Nexus grid cannot provide guidance for this situation. The human tactics do not exist in our database." Rael looked at the image of Jae Hyun, who was now explaining something about creative storytelling and collaborative problem-solving to his friends. The humans were approaching the most serious situation in their species' history like it was an entertaining hobby, and somehow it was working. "Continue monitoring," Rael finally said, "and prepare a full tactical analysis. We need to understand what we are facing." "Yes, sir." As the communication ended, Rael realized something that disturbed him deeply. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Keith Empire was facing an enemy they did not understand. The humans were not just unpredictable. They had turned unpredictability itself into a weapon, and Rael had no idea how to fight against that. Supreme Tactician Rael called an emergency meeting of the War Council. For the first time in his career, he needed help understanding an enemy. The greatest military minds in the Keth Empire gathered in the Academy's main strategy room. Intelligence. Chief Yoon Sitek stood before the assembled council with a datapad full of information that made no sense. Her usual confidence was replaced by visible confusion. Supreme Tactician, honored council members, she began. We have located the source of human coordination. The individual known as Jae Hyun operates from a residence in the human city of Portland. However, his influence extends across their entire planet. The holographic display showed Jae's modest home. Inside, he sat at a kitchen table surrounded by books, papers, and small figurines. Multiple computer screens showed him communicating with humans all around the world. This human appears to hold no official military rank, Yoon continued. He works in what humans call information technology. However, he serves as what they term a dungeon master for an activity called Dungeons and Dragons. General Kex Vorthein, Rail's most experienced field commander, leaned forward. What is this? Dungeons and Dragons? Sir, it appears to be a recreational simulation involving tactical problem-solving and creative storytelling. Participants create imaginary scenarios and work together to solve complex problems using creativity rather than established procedures. The EO. Council members looked at each other in confusion. General Vex Morvain spoke up. Are you saying their military resistance is being coordinated by someone who plays games for entertainment? Yes, sir. Moreover, thousands of humans across their planet appear to have experience with this activity. They are applying gaming principles to actual warfare. Rail studied the display showing Jay's activities. The human was currently explaining something to a group of people on his computer screen. He used terms like creative solutions, thinking outside the box, and collaborative storytelling. Show me examples of how this affects the battlefield, Rail ordered. The display changed to show multiple combat zones around Earth. In each location, human forces were implementing strategies that defied every principle of military science. In Yi, Tokyo, Commander Ha-young convinced our forces to withdraw by citing obscure regulations in our own military code, Yoon reported. She discovered technicalities that we never considered enemies might exploit. That is impossible. Our military code is designed to prevent such exploitation. Yes, sir, but the humans approach it like what they call rules lawyering. They find creative interpretations of official procedures and use them in ways we never anticipated. The next example showed New York City, where a human named Do-won had somehow convinced an entire Keth battalion to participate in what he called a philosophical discussion about the nature of honor and duty. This human challenged our forces to single combat, Yoon explained. But when our champion accepted, Do-won engaged him in a 16-hour conversation about military ethics. By the end, our warrior was questioning his entire purpose and requested transfer to non-combat duties. General Kex slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. How can conversation defeat trained soldiers? The humans seem to understand, something we do not, Yoon replied. They recognize that every thinking being has doubts and curiosities. They exploit these psychological factors using methods their games have taught them. The most disturbing example came from Berlin, where human forces had somehow convinced two separate Keth units to fight each other instead of fighting humans. How? Rail demanded. The human commander created a scenario where both units believed the other was threatening civilian populations. By the time they realized they had been manipulated, the humans had captured most of their equipment and declared the city a neutral zone. Rail felt something he had never experienced before. Complete tactical confusion. What does the Nexus grid recommend? Sir, the grid cannot process these tactics. It was designed to predict rational military behavior. The humans are behaving irrationally, but their irrational behavior is somehow more effective than our rational responses. The room fell silent. The greatest military minds in the galaxy were stumped by humans who treated war like a game. Sir, Yoon continued, we intercepted communications from this Jae Hyun. He has been conducting what humans call gaming sessions, where he presents hypothetical scenarios to other humans. They respond with creative solutions that are then implemented by human forces worldwide. Show me. The display returned to Jay's house. He was sitting with 5 other humans around his kitchen table. The table was covered with books, dice, character sheets, and small painted figures representing different types of warriors and monsters. "Okay, team," Jay was saying to his friends. "The Keth have superior technology and numbers, but they are thinking like a computer program. They follow rules and expect us to follow the same rules." "Hanji, what would you do if you were playing a low-level character against an overpowered enemy?" A woman named Hanji smiled. "Easy. I would convince them to fight each other instead of fighting me. Or I would change the victory conditions so that winning meant something different than what they expected." "Perfect. Mi Young, you are our best strategist. How do we make that happen?" Another woman, Mi Young, studied some notes on the table. "We need to think like we are running a campaign where the enemy has all the stats and equipment, but we control the narrative. We make them play our game instead of theirs." Rael watched in horror as these humans spent 2 hours developing strategies that would never occur to any trained military mind. They discussed concepts like narrative control, player agency, and collaborative storytelling as if they were legitimate military tactics. Worse, they were transmitting these ideas to resistance fighters across Earth, who were implementing them with devastating effectiveness against Keth forces. "Sir," General Keck said quietly, "I have been a soldier for 40 years. I have studied every form of combat known to our species, but I do not understand what I am seeing." "None of us do," Rael admitted. "We have spent millennia perfecting the science of warfare. The humans are treating it like an art form." "What are our options?" asked General Vex. Rael considered the question. The Keth Empire had 3 standard responses to unexpected resistance: overwhelming force, siege tactics, or negotiated surrender. But the humans seemed immune to all 3 approaches. Overwhelming force failed because the humans scattered and regrouped using unpredictable methods. Siege tactics failed because they turned sieges into games and somehow convinced Keth soldiers to participate. Negotiated surrender failed because the humans kept changing the terms of engagement. "Sir," Yun interjected, "there is something else. The humans have started referring to this conflict as the ultimate campaign. They appear to view our invasion not as a threat to be defeated, but as an exciting challenge to be enjoyed." "They are enjoying being invaded?" "It appears so, sir. Their communications show high levels of enthusiasm and creativity. They are having fun while fighting for their survival." Rael studied the display showing Jay and his friends. They were laughing and joking while planning strategies that were humiliating the greatest military force in the galaxy. "Intelligence Chief Yun," Rael said finally, "I want complete surveillance on this Jae Hyun. Monitor every communication, every decision, every action. We need to understand how his mind works." "Yes, sir. And prepare contingency plans. If we cannot defeat the humans using conventional methods, we may need to try something unprecedented." "What kind of contingency, sir?" Rael looked at his council of experienced generals and tacticians. They were the best military minds the Keth Empire had ever produced. They had conquered dozens of species and won thousands of battles, but they had never faced an enemy who fought like they were playing the ultimate game. "I do not know yet," Rael admitted, "but we are going to have to learn to think like humans think. We are going to have to understand games." The council members looked at each other with concern. The supreme tactician of the Keth Empire had just admitted that their perfect military system was not enough. For the first time in 3,000 years, they were going to have to improvise, and improvisation was something the Keth had never learned to do. 3 weeks into what should have been a quick conquest, the Keth Empire faced their first military defeat in 3,000 years. Reports from Earth grew more confusing every day. Supreme Tactician Rael sat in his office, reading field reports. That sounded like fiction. Human forces had somehow turned warfare into something that resembled organized chaos. They were using tactics that should not work, but somehow did. "Sir," Intelligence Chief Yun announced as she entered his office, "we have another situation report from Earth. The humans have escalated their unconventional tactics." "How much worse can it get?" Rael asked. "They have started using what they call rules lawyering against us." "Explain." Yun activated a holographic display showing various battle zones around Earth. "The humans have discovered obscure details in our own invasion protocols and are exploiting them in ways we never anticipated. The first example showed Seoul, where Commander Ha Young had somehow convinced an entire Keth battalion to withdraw by citing a regulation about weather conditions during military operations. Regulation 847B states that Keth forces should avoid combat operations during severe atmospheric disturbances, Yoon explained. Commander Ha Young used human weather modification technology to create exactly those conditions, then demanded we follow our own rules. And our forces withdrew? Yes, sir. The battalion commander felt obligated to follow proper protocol. The humans then celebrated by rolling dice and shouting about critical successes. Rail rubbed his temples. What else? In New York, a human named Du Wan declared 6 city blocks a neutral zone and challenged our forces to single combat. Winner takes all. That is not a legitimate military tactic. We agreed with you, sir. However, when our champion refused the challenge, Du Wan accused us of cowardice and began broadcasting this claim across all human communication networks. The shame caused severe morale problems among our troops. So our champion accepted the challenge? Yes, sir. But Du Wan did not defeat him through superior fighting skill. Instead, he engaged our warrior in a philosophical discussion about honor, duty, and the meaning of victory. The conversation lasted 16 hours and ended, with our champion joining the human resistance. Rail stared at the report. Our soldier defected? He claims the humans helped him understand that true victory comes from protecting innocent people, not conquering them. He has requested transfer to humanitarian duties. That is impossible. Keth soldiers do not change sides. It appears humans are very persuasive when they want to be, sir. They seem to understand psychology in ways our training never covered. The examples continued. In London, humans had convinced Keth forces that the entire city was a cultural heritage site protected by galactic law. In Tokyo, they declared their resistance a performance art piece and demanded protection under artistic freedom statutes. In Cairo, they claimed their defense was actually a religious ceremony that could not be interrupted. None of these claims have legal standing, Rail protested. The humans disagree, sir. They argue that since they never agreed to our invasion terms, they have the right to establish their own rules of engagement. That is not how warfare works. The humans claim it is how their warfare works. They have started implementing what they call house rules. Yoon showed him a transmission from Jae-hyun that had been broadcast to all human resistance groups. Remember, everyone, we never agreed to play by their rules. In our campaign, creativity beats superior stats every time. Use the environment, think outside the box, and remember that every problem has at least 3 solutions. Sir, Yoon continued, the humans seem to believe that warfare is a collaborative storytelling exercise where both sides should have fun and learn something meaningful. That is insane. Perhaps, but it is working. Our forces report increasing confusion and declining morale. Many soldiers are questioning the purpose of the invasion. Rail stood and walked to his window overlooking the War Academy. Thousands of students were practicing combat formations with mechanical precision. Their movements were perfect, exactly as the Nexus grid had taught them. But perfection was not working against humans. What does the Nexus grid recommend? He asked. The grid has stopped providing recommendations, sir. It cannot process tactics that change based on creativity rather than logic. So we are fighting blind. Yes, sir. The humans have successfully made prediction impossible by making their behavior deliberately unpredictable. A new report came, and while they were talking, Commander Zeth's voice crackled over the communication system from Earth. Supreme Tactician, we have a new development. The humans have organized what they call a global gaming convention. A what? They are treating the entire war like a massive multiplayer game. Human civilians are participating by providing creative suggestions to military units. Children are drawing pictures of monsters that somehow become real tactical problems for our forces. Elderly humans are sharing stories that inspire new resistant strategies. How is this possible? Sir, the humans have turned their entire planet into one big game session. Every person is participating in some way. They are having fun while fighting for their lives. Rael felt something he had never experienced: complete military helplessness. The Keth Empire had conquered the galaxy through superior planning and perfect execution, but the humans were winning through chaos and creativity. "Sir," Yun said quietly, "there is something else. Our soldiers are starting to enjoy the challenge." "What?" "Many Keth troops report that fighting humans is more interesting than previous conquests. The unpredictability is stimulating. Some soldiers have requested extended deployment because they want to see what the humans do next." "Our soldiers are becoming entertained by the enemy?" "It appears so, sir. The humans have somehow made warfare fun for both sides." Rael sat down heavily in his chair. The situation was completely unprecedented. The Keth Empire's perfect military system was being defeated by an enemy that treated serious matters like games. "Intelligence Chief Yun," he said finally, "I need you to study this Dungeons and Dragons activity. Learn everything about it. If we are going to defeat the humans, we need to understand how they think." "Yes, sir." "And Yun? Prepare for the possibility that we may need to try something no Keth has ever done before." "What is that, sir?" "We may need to learn how to play their game." As Yun left his office, Rael looked out at his perfectly ordered academy. Everything was logical, organized, and predictable. It was everything the humans were not, and for the first time in his career, Rael wondered if perfect order was actually a weakness. On Earth, Jae-hyun rolled a 20-sided die and grinned at his friends around the kitchen table. "Natural 20, again," he announced. "I think it is time for the final phase of our campaign. Are you ready to show these aliens what a real plot twist looks like?" His friends cheered and reached for their dice. The ultimate game was about to begin. 1 month after the invasion began, Jae-hyun made an announcement that confused every military analyst in the Keth Empire. The message went out on all human communication networks at the same time. "Attention everyone," Jae broadcast to resistance groups worldwide. "It is time for the campaign finale. We are going for total party victory. Remember, the best ending is when everyone walks away with a great story to tell." What followed was the most elaborate military operation in human history, and the most incomprehensible tactical maneuver the Keth had ever witnessed. Human forces around the world began what could only be described as organized performance art, disguised as warfare. In London, Commander So Min convinced the entire Keth occupation force to participate in what she called a cultural exchange program. She declared the city a diplomatic sanctuary and invited the aliens to learn about human customs. "You came here to understand us," So Min explained to the confused Keth officers. "So let us teach you about human culture properly." The Keth forces, following their own protocols about respecting diplomatic customs during first contact situations, found themselves attending tea parties and museum tours. Human children gave them flowers and asked questions about alien life. Elderly humans shared stories about their own experiences with war and peace. By the end of the week, the Keth soldiers were helping human civilians repair buildings damaged during the invasion. They had somehow become tourists instead of conquerors. Tokyo General Bo Ram took a different approach. He challenged the Keth command structure to what he called an intelligence contest. It was a series of puzzles, riddles, and strategic problems designed to test creative thinking rather than military knowledge. "If you are truly superior," Bo Ram announced, "prove it by solving problems that require imagination as well as logic." The Keth officers, confident in their intellectual abilities, accepted the challenge immediately. What they did not realize was that Bo Ram had designed the contest to keep their most brilliant strategists occupied for days, while human forces methodically captured their equipment using techniques learned from scavenger hunts and treasure hunting games. Similar operations happened worldwide. In Berlin, humans convinced Keth forces that they were participating in the galaxy's first interspecies peace festival. In Sydney, they organized what they called alien-human friendship competitions. In Cairo, they created elaborate historical reenactments that somehow resulted in Keth soldiers learning about human art and philosophy. But the masterstroke came when Jae-hyun himself left his house in Portland and walked directly to the Keth command ship orbiting above the city. He was completely unarmed and carried nothing but a small bag containing dice and notebook. "I request a meeting with your Supreme Commander," he announced when Keth security forces surrounded him. Commander Zeth Morvain agreed to the meeting more from curiosity than diplomacy. He had been trying to understand this strange human for weeks. Now Jay had delivered himself directly to the Keth flagship. They met in the ship's main conference room. Zeth sat across from Jay at a metal table designed for military briefings. The human looked completely relaxed, as if he were visiting friends instead of confronting an alien invasion force. "What do you want?" Zeth asked. "I want to offer you a deal," Jay replied, placing his dice on the table between them. "One final game. If I win, your forces leave Earth peacefully and we become friends. If you win, humanity surrenders unconditionally and joins your empire willingly." "What kind of contest?" "A campaign. I will be the dungeon master, you will be the player. I will create a scenario and you will have to solve it using your tactical knowledge. But here is the important part. In my game, there is always more than one solution to every problem. The question is whether you can think beyond your training." Zeth considered the offer. As a Keth commander, he had been trained to solve strategic problems through logic and calculation. This human was challenging him to a contest of pure tactical thinking. "What are the rules?" Zeth asked. "Simple. I describe a military situation. You tell me how to solve it. But you have to explain not just what you would do, but why it would work and how it would affect everyone involved. And if I solve your scenario, then you prove that Keth thinking is superior to human thinking. But if you cannot solve it, you have to admit that maybe there are better ways to approach problems than the ones you learned in school." Zeth had spent his entire career solving tactical problems. He had never encountered a challenge he could not calculate his way through. "I accept." Jay smiled and pulled out his notebook. "Excellent. Here is your scenario. You are commanding a mixed force of different species who do not trust each other. They have been forced to work together against a common enemy, but they keep fighting among themselves instead of fighting the real threat. Your mission is to unite them and defeat the enemy. But here is the catch. You cannot use force or intimidation to make them cooperate." "That is simple," Zeth replied. "I would establish clear command authority, assign roles based on capabilities, and implement discipline protocols to prevent internal conflict." "Okay, but what if your authority is not recognized? What if each group believes their way of fighting is the only correct way? What if traditional discipline makes them rebel instead of comply?" Zeth frowned. This was not a standard tactical problem. I would find the most respected leader among them and convince them to support my command." "Good idea. But what if there are 3 equally respected leaders who all hate each other? What if supporting one means the other 2 will leave completely?" For the next hour, Jay presented Zeth with problem after problem. Every time the Keth commander offered a logical solution, the human added complications that made simple answers impossible. The scenario kept changing, requiring constant adaptation and creative thinking. "This is impossible," Zeth finally said. "No commander could handle this many variables." "Actually," Jay replied, "this exact situation happened to me last month, during our regular gaming session. My friend Han Ji was playing a character trying to unite different fantasy races against an evil empire. How did she solve it? She stopped trying to command them and started trying to understand them. She learned what each group really wanted, what they were afraid of and what they dreamed about. Then she helped them realize they all wanted the same things: safety for their families and freedom to live their own way. But how did that defeat the enemy? It turned out the evil empire was only powerful because everyone was too busy fighting each other to work together. Once the different groups became friends, the empire had no chance. The real victory was not defeating the enemy, but helping everyone understand that cooperation is stronger than conquest." Zeth sat quietly for a moment, thinking about what Jay had said. "You are telling me that your friend solved an impossible military situation by making enemies into friends?" "That is exactly what I am telling you. And that is exactly what humans have been trying to do with your invasion." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Your soldiers are attending tea parties in London. They are learning about human art in Cairo. They are making friends with human children around the world. When was the last time any of them reported wanting to fight us? Zeth realized with shock that Jay was right. Reports from Earth had stopped mentioning combat operations days ago. Instead, Keth forces were sending requests for extended cultural exchange programs and asking for permission to establish permanent diplomatic missions. You did not defeat us, Zeth said slowly. You converted us. We showed you that there are better ways to solve problems than fighting, Jay agreed. We made you part of our story instead of making you our enemy. But we came here to conquer you, and we invited you to become our friends instead. Which option sounds more fun to you? Zeth looked at his hands. He had 4 arms, purple skin, and had been trained since childhood to be a perfect warrior. But sitting across from this human who treated warfare like a game, he realized something important. He had been having more fun in the past month than in his entire military career. If I agree to your terms, Zeth asked, what happens next? We throw the biggest celebration party in galactic history, Jay replied with a grin. And then we start planning our next campaign together. I hear there are some interesting challenges in the Andromeda Galaxy that could use creative solutions. 2 hours later, the Keth invasion fleet began broadcasting a message to every ship in the galaxy. Mission status: successful cultural exchange completed. Earth designated as permanent diplomatic ally. Request permission to establish ongoing friendship protocols. Supreme Tactician Rael received the message in his office on Velthura. He read it 3 times before he understood what had happened. The humans had not defeated the Keth Empire. They had recruited it. Intelligence Chief Yun, he called. Prepare my transport to Earth, and requisition a set of those dice the humans use. It appears we have much to learn about their methods. Yes, sir. Should I notify the Academy that we are changing our curriculum? Yes. From now on, we will be teaching courses in creative problem-solving, collaborative storytelling, and something called friendship. The humans have taught us that the best victories are the ones where everyone wins. On Earth, Jae Hyun returned to his house in Portland where his friends were waiting.